Inside an abandoned McDonald's and proudly flying a pirate flag is a group of rebellious scientists. This group of enlightened rogues has translated secrets from 50-year-old satellites equipped with spy technology, pictures that were nearly lost forever. Welcome back to Common Ground. The first images of the moon at risk of being lost forever, saved by a small group of Northern California scientists. Here's Common Ground's Dave Menacheri with a tale that takes us to the moon and back.
Long before Neil Armstrong ever uttered the words,
"It's one small step for man,"
there was a different giant leap, a leap of technology. One that was so ahead of its time, only now are they able to see just how huge a leap it really was.
50 years ago, just a few years before we put a man on the moon, NASA engineers realized they had no idea what the moon looked like. There were theories that the lunar orbiter could land in sand and sink down and kill all the astronauts, or that the moon was so brittle it might break apart if they tried to land on it. So NASA sent a series of satellites into outer space and took photos of the moon.
Photos that caused a sensation. And yet, for as big of a splash as those photos made, they were nearly forgotten, nearly lost, except for the work of a small group of rebellious scientists inside an old McDonald's here in Northern California. But before we can take you inside the lunar McDonald's, you have to take a step back to where this project began, 50 years ago. They called it Lunar Orbiter, a satellite made by the Boeing company. Yes, the same Boeing that makes airplanes. They launched the first one in 1966 and equipped it with a state-of-the-art kind of camera and film.
They did 5 spacecraft between August of 1966 and September of 1967. Because back then these things weren't as reliable as that we'll send 5 and maybe 3 of them will work, but all 5 worked just perfectly. This right here is what I had.
Dennis Wingo knows all about the Lunar Orbiter. He studied photos from the satellite when he was in college.
It had a super fine grain structure, and it was used back then by the spy satellites to take pictures.
The film then moves into the processor, where it is rolled into contact with a bimat web, a material that has been soaked in a solution that develops and fixes the image.
In a series of documentaries, NASA showed how they retasked this self-developing film for a kind of lunar reconnaissance. The satellite would scan the negatives using a photoelectric sensor.
The film is scanned by a light beam 1/20th as thick as a human hair.
And it's 0.11 inch, and so they do that 98 times to make a high-resolution image. They do it 29 times for a medium-resolution image.
Then the satellite scrambled or modulated the information and beamed it to one of 3 listening stations back on Earth, who recorded everything on big 2-inch videotape reels. The pictures were such high resolution, NASA didn't have equipment to download them off the tape itself. So in essence, they had to make a copy of a copy of a copy.
And it went to what's called a kinescope, which is basically a cathode ray tube, 35mm film camera that would sit there and watch the kinescope and make pictures with 35mm film. That 35mm film would then be processed into a positive that they then had to take and lay a bunch of them side by side to make a negative.
NASA would then look at these blown up pictures of the moon to find a place to land the Apollo missions. And once we put a man on the moon,
One giant leap for mankind.
Lunar Orbiter and its cache of pictures were set aside, nearly forgotten.
It's called a contractor report from NASA.
Until 2007. That's when Dennis Wingo got involved.
They used equipment that I was familiar with because I used to run a television station in Los Angeles.
In the 1980s, all the tapes were saved from destruction and stored in Southern California at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And the tape machines they needed, those were in a former NASA archivist's barn.
We were very lucky. Those tape drives were actually built just up the road here in Redwood City at Ampex, one of the very early Silicon Valley great companies. And so there's a lot of retired engineers and from Ampex that knows how to work on this equipment. We have 1,474 of these tapes.
Wingo just needed a building, which is where the McDonald's comes in.
And we were looking between this building and the beauty shop, the old beauty shop.
The McDonald's had vent hoods for all the soldering they were going to do, and the air conditioning worked. The building was free, which they needed because your budget wasn't huge. I know
We had no budget.
just $120,000. But with the building came something else, some unexpected help from a NASA colleague.
I think I remember it mostly of getting the van and then she dropped us off.
Casey Harper was just 12 when the building, now dubbed McMoon, was given to the Lunar Orbiter Image Recovery Project, or LORP.
Me and my brother were 12 and then my older brother was, 17, I think, at the time.
Casey's mom didn't want the kids at home during the summer, so she volunteered them to work at LORP. And it was a lot of work.
Scared the bejesus out of me, though.
See this right here? These are the heads.
Cleaning the old Ampex tape machines, with some parts so dirty
30, 50, I don't know, years of caked dust, just in every nook and cranny. So he had us go into the back and spray them down with water.
Did you have the demodulator to be able to do all that?
No, we didn't. We did what we call technoarchaeology, which is literally to go back and find records, incomplete records, because again, this stuff was classified.
But one of those retired engineers rebuilt the card from an old mathematical formula. They fired up the machine and
Day of the year is 139. The date is the 19th of May 1967.
voices from 50 years ago came through.
4-1, see anything interesting on that site we had last night?
Dennis Wingo could now transfer the raw framelets direct to a computer in full resolution. They started with one of the most famous images of all time.
We got really lucky on the first tape because the first tape was the famous Earthrise image.
Life magazine called it the picture of the century. It was obvious this was an important tape because there were 6 copies of it, which also meant they had 6 tries to get something right or wrong. When Wingo and his team took the original full-resolution material and restored it, this is what that same picture looks like.
Think about this Earth. There were 2 billion fewer people. There were people fighting in the jungles of Southeast Asia on this Earth that we're looking at.
It was definitely kind of a surreal experience to kind of know that I helped work on these and help them come up and running, to see them actually work.
Since then, the crew at McMoon have been able to print stunning images of the moon, including its dark side. Photos with such high resolution, they rival even the newest satellite orbiting the moon.
Now to the over here on this end, this is from NASA's $1 billion lunar orbiter that's in orbit around the moon now. Similar lighting, similar resolution, 47 years difference in time.
All 1,470 tapes have been scanned and are now stored on the other side of the condiment shelf, inside the fridge. Casey, now 20, is project lead.
These are the first images ever taken. To see them in such a high quality and to see all of these craters and knowing that they're 50 years old and they don't look like it.
And on this 50th anniversary of the Lunar Orbiter's launch, they are poised to finish their work
The goal right now is to finish before the end of December.
and show the world the technological marvels from 50 years ago that still amaze people today.
And it's just really a testament to how good it was that we can take the same data and make it look so much better. They were steely-eyed missile men back then.
Missile men whose genius is finally being seen in full resolution. At Moffett Field, Dave Manacheri for Common Ground.
Incredible images. Well, the machines used to record those tapes, are in storage again, not in a barn, but they're now housed at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The New Museum in Los Gatos is running a full exhibit of the McMoon project. It runs through May 2017, and we have a full interactive experience about McMoon with maps, plus before and after pictures and more on our website at KCRA.com.